I'm Nikki.
And I'm Jess.
She's the traumatized.
And she's the abandoned.
And welcome to our podcast, where we talk about true crime, spooky things, and everything in between.
And today we're going to be talking about some natural disasters / maritime disasters. What are you doing?
Disaster.
Just
disaster.
We're just talking about some disasters today. Or disastrous. So how was your week?
It was good-ish. The son is being a little naughty in school, so depending how well he does today, the Xbox is disappearing.
It's serious.
Oh yeah. Other than that, he's getting better. Did I talk about this last week? The whole homework things? Did we talk about it in the podcast or just separately?
Maybe separately.
I don't know. I can't remember. But anyways, for his homework, so each week they learn a letter of the alphabet.
It was separately.
Okay, yeah. So each week they learn a letter of the alphabet. Well, they're getting towards the end now. Obviously it's getting towards the end of the year, but they started sending home homework, and so he has to read these 5 sentences that have the letter incorporated into words. So like F is for fox and stuff like that. And I'm like, why are they now just sending these? Like, why weren't these at the beginning of the year? Because it's helping him so much. Like the first week we did it was horrible because he didn't want to do it and it was just hard for him. But now, like at the beginning of this week, it was Z. Like I grabbed the paper and I was looking for the pencil and I hear him. Z is for Z. Like sounding it out like I taught him.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why wasn't this from the beginning? Like I feel like my son would be so much further along in his reading and not have to go to a special class if these were sent home.
Because the first time I heard it was X, right? And he sat down and he was like, bam, bam, bam. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Beanie, look at you go. But now knowing that they haven't been doing that this whole time, and it's like, why not? Because he sounds like he knows what he's doing, you know?
It's almost like, what do they teach him? Because he didn't even know how to sound out a word.
Right.
Like obviously they were teaching him like vowel sounds. He's not like the A and whatever the heck they learned that. But I was the one who had to teach him, okay, F, like separate the letters and like make the sound and then put it together. And I don't know. But anyways, he's doing much better reading now. Good. So that's
I'm sorry it took this long.
Right? So how was your week? Or what were you gonna say? I can't remember.
What was that? Is that all you want to talk about your week was Beanie?
Yeah.
Is that really all that's happened?
That's pretty much it, yeah.
Okay. My week, it's been busy. No, it's great. I was gonna go out and I didn't, so I'm glad I didn't. But we just ended up staying in and playing games. And then Saturday we did like a separate boys' night, girls' night, where I went with my sister-in-law and her friends and family. We went bowling, which I did not bowl. I sat there and played with my nephew the whole time. It was great. So it was just very busy weekend. It was so much fun. I'm just very tired. So do you want to hear the fun fact of the day?
Fun fact of the day.
Fun fact of the day. Did you know that your signature could reveal personality traits?
Oh, Lord.
Study in a 2016 suggests that among men, a larger signature correlates with higher social bravado, meaning like all over the place. And among women, a bigger signature correlates narcissistic traits.
Oh, interesting.
Very interesting. And now I want to look at somebody's sign. Let's see.
I want to look at people's signatures now.
I do a big J, but like I do a big J and then squiggle, squiggle, squiggle. And then a B and then squiggle, squiggle, squiggle. So like I don't know if that correlates like big. It's kind of both. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
Mine is similar to my mom's. I adapted my mom's, like
Aww.
the way that she does her last name.
That's cute.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So you ready? What are you talking about today? I'm so excited.
I am ready. Are you ready?
I don't know. I don't know what we're talking about. I have no idea. I know you know what I'm talking about, but I don't know what you're talking about.
Should I tell you or should I just jump into it?
Just jump into it. Jump into it.
I mean, the intro paragraph is probably going to give you an idea.
It usually does. And I love your intros.
So, the morning of June 30th, 1956 started off as any other normal morning. 53 people boarded United Airlines Flight 718 at LAX to make their way to Chicago, while 64 passengers aboard Transworld Airlines Flight 2 awaited takeoff to Kansas City from LAX. Just an hour and a half into their flights, a tragedy would strike that would spark a change in the aviation world.
What?
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. Indeed.
In the years following World War II, the United States and much of the world experienced an economic boom, so many more people than ever could afford to fly. Many passengers were waiting to board their flights at LAX, like I said, on a normal June morning. Among those flights was Transworld Flight 2, a Lockheed L-1049 Super Constellation with Captain Jack Gandy, First Officer James Rittner, and Flight Engineer Forrest Brayfogle. So the TWA flight, that's what we're going to call it, the Transworld flight, had been delayed a few minutes to complete minor maintenance to the aircraft. The flight, with 70 souls aboard, departed LAX at 9:01 a.m. from runway 25 to make their way to Kansas City, Missouri.
Okay.
Initially flying under instrument flight rules, climbed to the authorized height of 19,000 feet and stayed in controlled airspace as far as Daggett, California. And later on, I'll show a map. If you're listening on podcast, go to our YouTube or our socials will probably have
pictures. Yeah.
That will show this. So, an instrument flight rules is like obviously what it says, instrument flight rules.
Yeah.
There is also visual flight rules. That's where the pilots rely on visually like looking around them rather than the instruments. So we got that.
Yep.
At Daggett, California, Captain Grandy turned right to a heading of 059 degrees magnetic toward the radio range near Trinidad, Colorado. The flight was now off airways, otherwise known as uncontrolled airspace.
Okay.
Another flight waiting to depart LAX was United Airlines Flight 718, a Douglas DC-7 and flown by Captain Robert Bob Shirley, First Officer Robert Harms, and Flight Engineer Gerard Fury.
Okay.
So this flight had also been delayed due to increased holiday traffic.
Oh.
Which I'm like confused about because it's June 30th, unless it's just like people getting ready for 4th of July. I don't know. Either way, so they departed from runway 25L at 9:04 a.m. en route to Chicago, Illinois, with 58 souls on board. Climbing to an authorized altitude of 21,000 feet, Captain Shirley flew under IFR, which is the instrument flight rules, in controlled airspace to a point northeast of Palm Springs, California, where he turned left toward a radio beacon near Needles, California, after which his flight plan was direct to Durango in southwestern Colorado.
Okay.
Again, like I said, to get visual on this, go to our social medias or the YouTube.
Socials.
You'll see a map. United's DC-7, though still under IFR, was now like TWA en route in uncontrolled airspace. So at this point, they're both in uncontrolled airspace from air traffic.
Okay.
Air traffic control, if that makes sense.
Interesting. Okay.
At 9:21 a.m., TWA Captain Gandy hit some turbulence and requested a change in altitude from 19,000 feet to 21,000 feet. In this time period, neither crew members had direct contact with air traffic control, so requests had to be called in. From my understanding, is like they called somebody within their company, and then the company called air traffic control, and then like it was like a telephone line. So the air traffic controller, aware of United's flight plan, crossed TWA in the vicinity of northern Arizona, denied this request because the United was already at 21,000 feet.
Right.
So then Captain Gandy requested 1,000 on top clearance, which is flying 1,000 feet above the clouds. So if there's like clouds in your way, thunderstorm in your way, which is kind of like what they were saying happened.
Yeah. Okay.
It's request to go 1,000 on top of that.
Okay. That makes sense.
This was approved by air traffic control and meant that the Constellation, the TWA flight, was still under IFR, but free of separation restrictions normally applied by air traffic control. It transferred to Gandy and Rittner the responsibility for maintaining safe separation from other aircraft on the principle then termed C and B scene. Air traffic control also informed Captain Gandy that United Flight 718 would be trafficking near him.
Okay.
The controller that approved this climb to 1,000 feet on top hadn't realized over the Grand Canyon that morning clouds had reached 20,000 feet.
Oh, geez. So they were just trying to go all that way. Wow.
Although the clearance allowed Captain Gandy to fly at any height at or above 21,000 feet, he did indeed climb to 21,000 feet, which he was just denied. Both crews were then at this altitude, and both had estimated that they would cross the Painted Desert line at about 10:31 a.m. Pacific time.
So did he report that he was going 21,000 feet, or did everyone just assume he was lower? Wow. Okay.
It was out of their control.
Oh, wow.
He's in uncontrolled airspace, so they don't know.
Wow.
It's up to him to
right,
decide.
Seen or be seen. Gotcha. Well...
So as the two aircraft approached the Grand Canyon at the same altitude and nearly the same speed, the pilots were likely maneuvering around towering cumulus clouds, which are the ones that are big and puffy and go like
and really high,
really tall.
Yep.
As they were maneuvering near the canyon, it is believed the planes passed the same cloud on opposite sides.
Oh,
Can
wow.
you imagine?
No.
So I think we all know where this is going.
Yeah.
At about 10:30 a.m., the two aircraft collided over the canyon at an angle of about 25 degrees. And we kind of just have guesstimation of like what happened.
Oh, no.
So these are kind of like the two kind of
guesses. But like how, so if, I guess because they were in clouds, right? So they couldn't see each other at all.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, are there rear view mirrors for?
No.
I don't think there's side mirrors. But then whoever's in the back should have seen the other plane, you know what I mean? Unless they were literally side by side and they just like, I don't know.
So post-crash analysis determined that the United DC-7 was banking to the right and pitching down at the time of the collision, suggesting that one or possibly both of United pilots spotted TWA Constellation and attempted evasive action.
Okay.
So the left wingtip of the United DC-7 struck the center fin on the Constellation's triple tail and sliced straight through the rear fuselage. Simultaneously, the DC-7's number one propeller ripped open the underside of the Constellation's aft baggage compartment.
Ooh.
The catastrophic collision, lasting less than half a second, instantly crippled both aircraft beyond all hope of recovery. The separation of the tail assembly from the Constellation resulted in immediate loss of control, causing the aircraft to enter a near vertical terminal velocity dive.
That's terrifying.
Plunging into the Grand Canyon at an estimated speed of more than 700 feet per second, as in 480 miles per hour. They hit the ground.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Wow.
The Constellation slammed into the north slope of a ravine on the northeast slope of Temple Butte and disintegrated on impact, instantly killing all aboard. It was likely they never knew what hit them. From the angle, it's like, I don't think the pilots would have been able to see. So like they obviously had no idea why they were going down, and it happened so fast.
Wow. That's terrifying.
An intense fire fueled by aviation gasoline ensued. The severed tail assembly, badly battered but still somewhat recognizable, came to rest nearby. That's kind of how we know what happened, is because the tail assembly and the wing kind of like fell together, and they were able to determine with like paint chippings and stuff like that that's what happened, that they hit each other in those spots.
I mean, that's like what they do for car accidents and stuff like that. That's crazy.
The fate of the United 718 was a little more drawn out. Having lost 6 meters off its left wing, the DC-7 entered a prolonged leftward spiral, descending at a high rate of speed toward the yawning chasm below. With such terrible damage, the plane would have been uncontrollable, obviously.
Yeah, like you can't guide that down easy. Like that's not a thing.
United 718 slammed into the buttress like promontory protruding from the nearly 1,000-meter high sheer face, the Shar Butte, sending burning debris ricocheting off the cliff and down a dark crevice. For the 58 passengers and crew, as for their counterparts aboard the Constellation, there was no hope for survival.
Not when you're hitting the ground at that freaking velocity. That's wild.
The airspace over the canyon was not under any type of radar observation. Like I said, they were flying off airways. There were also no homing beacons, cockpit voice recorders, or flight data recorders aboard either aircraft.
Okay.
The last position reports received for the flights did not reflect their locations at the time of the collision. Also, there was no credible witnesses to the collision itself or the subsequent crashes. So looking for these flights were very difficult. However, the only immediate indication of trouble was when United Company radio operators in Salt Lake City and San Francisco heard garbled transmission from Flight 718, the last from either aircraft. But like I said, not air traffic control.
No.
So this radio transmission went to the company's radio operators, not air traffic control.
Okay.
I didn't include this, but basically it's the captain saying 718, we're going in. And like I was like, we're going in? That makes no sense. But I guess like we're going into the canyon. That's my guess. As he was saying, we're going into the canyon.
I would say we're going down, but I mean,
that's
I guess
what I was thinking. I was like, why would he say like we're going down,
right?
Like, Mayday, like, but he said we're going in, and my assumption is like he was trying to say we're going into the canyon, like oh god, like panicking, we're going in, like oh god. Also in the background, you can hear the other pilot pull up, get up, or whatever. It became clear that something was wrong when both planes failed to report passing the painted desert line and could not be raised by radio on any frequency. As it dawned on the controllers that something terrible must have happened, a search and rescue mission was launched, scouring the desert by air in a futile search for some sign of the wreckage. It turned out that shortly after the accident, the Hudgen brothers, owners of a sightseeing tour thing called Grand Canyon Airlines, had earlier that day spotted 2 columns of smoke rising from a remote area near the confluence of the Colorado and the Little Colorado rivers in the eastern part of the canyon. Not having heard about the crash, they assumed the smoke came from like a brush fire. Only after their return to their home base at Grand Canyon Airport did they learn of the missing airliners. As dusk fell over the desert, they returned to the scene in their light aircraft, where they managed to spot the distinctive triple tail of the Constellation laying on a hillside above the Colorado River. And obviously the brothers reported their findings to authorities.
Wow.
So numerous helicopter missions were subsequently flown down to the crash sites to find and attempt to identify victims as well as recover wreckage for accident analysis. A difficult and dangerous process, obviously due to the rugged terrain and unpredictable air currents. Owing to the great violence of the impacts, no bodies were recovered intact, and positive identification of most of the remains were not possible. Also, for the United flight, they had to like fly in like special climbers to basically go from the top of the cliff and climb down, because like most of the wreckage was like in a crevice like in the wall. So the investigation of the accident was particularly challenging as well, due to the remoteness and the topography of the crash sites, as well as the extent of destruction of the 2 airliners and the lack of real-time flight data. They didn't have those like flight recorders that we do now.
Like are they called black boxes or little black box?
In the report, weather and the airworthiness of the 2 planes were thought to have played no role in the accident. Lacking credible eyewitnesses and with some uncertainty regarding high altitude visibility at the time of the collision, it was not possible to determine conclusively how much opportunity was available for the TWA and United pilots to see and avoid each other. And obviously another factor was the human factor, such as apparently airlines permitted their pilots to execute maneuvers to improve the passengers' view of the canyon. So I don't think I mentioned this before, but basically the TWA flight was not in their flight plan. They were like off course.
Oh, damn.
At 128 casualties, the Grand Canyon collision became the deadliest U.S. commercial airline disaster and the deadliest air crash on U.S. soil of any kind.
Wow.
The accident was covered by the press worldwide, and as the story unfolded, the public learned of the primitive nature of air traffic control and how little was being done to modernize it. In 1956, air traffic controllers were not responsible for preventing collisions and were only obligated to provide an advisory information about traffic when planes were in controlled airspace. There's a whole thing about like everyone came for the air traffic controller, but like there's like literally nothing he could do.
Yeah, he was not in controlled airspace.
And he obviously he went out of his way to be like, yo, Captain Grady, there's somebody in your vicinity, be careful. Or Captain Gandy, anyways, we'll get to it. By the way, he was like taken to trial and stuff, and he was proven innocent or whatever. Like he had, this is no fault of him. Outside of controlled airspace, controllers did not and could not know the exact position and course of an airplane, and any traffic advisory would be of questionable value. However, Captain Gandy had been told about the presence of United 718 nonetheless, and they still collided. So like I said, he was still warned and whatever.
Yeah.
The Civil Aviation Authority, or CAA, which was at the time responsible for regulating the aviation industry on the federal level, had been trying for several years to upgrade the technology used to control aircraft in U.S. airspace, but the agency was fundamentally limited by its weak mandate and the lack of funding. President Dwight Eisenhower took forceful action. In 1957, he signed the Airways Modernization Act, a law which greatly increased federal funding for upgrading and expanding air traffic control infrastructure. The following year, Eisenhower created the Federal Aviation Agency, now administration, a new organization which would replace the CAA and gave the new agency total control of American civilian and military airspace, because that was also one of the issues, is like the CAA did not have control over the military airspace, so it was like conflict of whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
Within a relatively short time after these reforms, designated airways with rights of way and radar monitoring were implemented across the United States. Funds were allocated for nationwide radar coverage, allowing aircraft movements to be tracked in even the most remote areas. More air traffic control personnel were hired and training increased. More ground-based navigational beacons were created. With the creation of Class A airspace, FR, which is like the visual flying rules at high altitudes, were no longer allowed. IFR instrument flight plans were required, and direct communication with air traffic controllers was established. So instead of like going through the airline's company now, it just went straight to the air traffic controllers.
That's so smart. Okay.
Like I said, replacing the communication system through company dispatchers. So pilots were still obligated to practice the see and avoid, but now a controller could spot an impending conflict and warn pilots well in advance to look for oncoming traffic. And obviously they got rid of the 1,000 on top clearance. So that whole thing. Yeah. So 2 memorial sites were created for the passengers and crew members of the 2 airlines. TWA arranged for a burial site at Citizens Cemetery in Flagstaff, Arizona, where many of the victims of Flight 2 were interred in just a mass grave, because many of the victims of United 718 were buried in a site within the Grand Canyon National Park. So today, although mostly cleared away, the wreckage from 1956 air disaster is still kind of scattered over the crash sites. And on sunny days, people can still catch glares from like the gnarled pieces of metal missing. Wow. Metal resting on the cliffs of the Grand Canyon.
Wild.
And although the loss of life was great on the day of June 30th, 1956, the deaths of the 128 souls would be the catalyst of change in the aviation world. And it is them to whom we owe our gratitude that we have the safest way of traveling through air flight.
It's very interesting that that is the reason why all these rules are here now. Obviously, there's always been a time where rules didn't exist, and so there's always a reason why. So that's wild.
Yeah.
Wild.
Because as I was looking for topics, I was like, I don't know what to do. I didn't want to do another train thing because I just did a train thing. And then I saw this, this is what catalyst, air traffic control changes. I was like, oh, that's interesting.
That's really interesting. Yeah. Warn certain people who have phobias of flying.
Car accidents happen every day. Plane crashes happen once in a millennia. No,
seriously,
not that often. It does happen.
It
happens more often than that. But you're more likely to probably die from an elevator falling than
that was rude.
Plane crash.
You're probably not wrong. That was rude.
Or cave diving.
Cave diving. I've been seeing some crazy cave diving ones, and I've stopped myself from sending them to you because I know. But there are some that like, whew. Okay. Anyway. Alrighty. Are you ready for mine?
Yes.
All right. Buckle up.
Do I? I don't think I know what you're doing. Oh,
you
yeah,
don't?
tornadoes.
Yes, you do.
Tornadoes, of course.
Tornadoes. Because when we had done the last outbreak in 2011, I briefly mentioned that the only other like really bad outbreak was the super outbreak of 1974. So now we're doing the super outbreak of 1974.
Oh.
Yeah, so what's crazy is this was from April 3rd, which again, I think the 2011 one was also in April. So just don't live in Tornado Valley during April.
Thanks.
Oh, just wait. So from April 3rd to April 4th in 1974, the super outbreak affected 13 states across eastern United States, from the Great Lakes region all the way down to the deep south. There were 148 tornadoes documented from this. And what's crazy, of that, 95 were F2 or stronger. 30 of those were F4 or F5s. And that's within 24 hours.
Wow.
Wild. Actually wild. Aside from the sheer number of tornadoes and the catastrophic damage they left behind, the tornadoes resulted in 335 deaths and more than 6,000 injuries.
Cheapers.
Literally all within 24 hours. Now, something we do need to keep in mind while we go through this horrific 24 hours is that the National Weather Service office boundaries and technologies were really different than they are today. Kind of what you were just saying. Like back in 1974, we did not have what we have today.
Right.
The Weather Service office, or the WSO in Cincinnati, served the greater Cincinnati tri-state area, while the WSO in Dayton was responsible for Miami Valley and up to West Central Ohio. So different offices control different, like areas. There wasn't a national one.
Okay.
In those days, not every NWS office was equipped with a radar. They didn't even have like radars. They didn't have radars back then.
Jesus.
Which is wild to me. A WSR 57, which is a weather surveillance radar, was installed at the WSO Cincinnati in 1960, given NWS meteorologist course reflective data, but no velocity data. So basically, you could see where a tornado was, you just couldn't see where it was going.
Right.
Which is unhelpful. So storms on the radar screen were traced onto thin paper maps, and meteorologists have heavily relied on manifestation of hook echoes as well as spotter reports when issuing tornado warnings.
Yeah. So
there was no like actual warning. It's a, hey, there's a tornado on the ground. Let's try to get ahead of it.
Right.
Just absolutely wild. The 1974 super outbreak was the first tornado outbreak in recorded history to produce more than 100 tornadoes in under a 24-hour period, which was a feat that was not repeated globally until the 1981 United Kingdom tornado outbreak, which, hello, is my next.
They have tornadoes?
I guess. I had no idea. So next topic. And obviously the United States 2011 super outbreak, which we already did. In 2023, tornado expert Thomas P. Grazielis created the Outbreak Intensity Score, which is a OIS, as a way to rank the various tornado outbreaks. Because at this point, we've had so many outbreaks, we got to rank them, which is just absolutely terrifying.
Right.
Of that, the 1974 super outbreak received an OIS of 446, making it the worst and most violent tornado outbreak in recorded history.
Wow.
This tornado outbreak produced the most violent F4, F5 tornadoes ever observed in a single tornado outbreak. There were 7 F5 tornadoes and 23 F4s.
Jeepers.
Which, like, we'll go into it. I think we touched it before, but even F4s will absolutely level a house.
Yeah.
Like, F5s will rip out foundation. F4s will level a house. So, like, that's insane. That's so scary.
Yeah.
Obviously, to keep this sort of kind of condensed, I'm not going to go over 100 and something tornadoes. We're going to really focus on the 7 F5s with like a little touch here and there of like important things that I felt happened. There are so many YouTube videos out there, guys, of this outbreak. So if you want more in depth, like they are hours long after this, go watch those and get a little bit more information on those. But yeah, no, it's wild. So from the early morning on April 3rd, warnings went out from the Gulf of Mexico to the Canadian border. Shit's about to go down. The first tornado of the outbreak is actually disputed, with some sources indicating there was an isolated F2 in Indiana at 9 a.m., while the Fujita scale actually marked the outbreak's onset at 1 p.m. with an F0 in Illinois. So that's kind of like disputed whether they want to include, it's kind of like, is Pluto a planet? Is that Indiana F2 part of it or not? So it was just a brief touchdown in an open field. So as the storm system moved east, where the daytime heating had made the air more unstable, the tornadoes grew more intense. So the first fatality was from an F3, which landed southwest of Cleveland. It hit 2 subdivisions near Blue Springs and destroyed 19 out of 20 trailers in a trailer park. More than 100 people were injured.
And that was from an F4?
That was from an F3.
F3, okay.
So then a tornado that struck near Monticello, Indiana, was the first F4. It had a path length of 121 miles, which was the longest path length of any tornado for this outbreak. A total of 19 people were killed in this tornado. So the first F5 tornado of the day struck the city of DePaul, Indiana at 3:20 p.m. Eastern Time. Of the F5 tornadoes produced by the outbreak, the DePaul Daisy tornado was the first to form, touching down again at 3:20 p.m. local time. It is probably the least known of the F5 tornadoes in this outbreak, as it traveled through mostly rural areas in southern Indiana, northwest of Louisville, traversing about 65 miles through the parts of Perry and Harrison counties.
That's like all around.
Yeah.
Like went right around.
It was the first of series of 5 F4 or F5 tornadoes that traveled from Perry County to northeast of Cincinnati. The tornado lacked a defined condensation funnel and was almost invisible while at an F5 intensity.
What? That's crazy.
So scary.
How does that even look?
Well, like in the pictures, that's not as wide as a normal F5, but you can kind of see to the right how it like dissipates. I actually think the top of that funnel is the actual F5 funnel, but you can't, like, it's not the actual. I think that full funnel, if it dropped, that's what an F5 looks like, but it's like dissipated. So it actually didn't have a defined funnel
shape.
Which I think makes it even more terrifying.
Scary. Yeah.
F5 damage was observed near the community of DePaul, where numerous farms were leveled. Areas near Palmyra and Borden were also heavily affected by the tornado. Morgan Elementary School in northern Harrison County, Indiana, was directly hit by the tornado. 4 classrooms were destroyed, and the roof was removed from the school and placed on the cars of the faculty.
Wow.
Fortunately, the children and faculty who were huddled in the hallways were not injured.
That's good.
All but 10 homes in Martinsburg were destroyed, and in Daisy Hill community, homes were completely swept away at an F5 intensity.
Hold on. My question. How come, like, you're in Tornado Alley. How come schools don't have, like, a
tornado
shelter?
That is such a good question. It's such a good question. Like, I don't know. I feel like that's something that should be, I mean, I guess they view it as like, okay, we're going to go in the hallway where there's no windows, and that's like a tornado shelter. But like, I feel like there should be a basement situation where you go in.
Yeah, there should definitely be like a basement or actual like shelter that is underground?
100%. Yeah, I don't know. That's a great question. Tornado Alley schools, what are you doing? Fix
What
it.
are you doing?
So published photographs of the storms reveal a very wide debris cloud and wall cloud structure with no visible condensation funnel bulletins. So like literally what I showed you. You could see the cloud structure, the wall cloud structure, but like under it, there's like literally no funnel.
Yeah.
The tornado had peaked at a width of 1,610 miles, which is just crazy to me. Overall, 6 people were killed by the storm and 86 were injured. One of the fatalities occurred when a woman was crushed by a school bus that flew into a ditch that she was sheltering in.
That's crazy.
Like, what are the odds? The Bradenburg tornado, which is in Bradenburg, Kentucky, was our second F5, and it took 31 lives. Touchdown in Breckinridge County around 3:25 local time. So let's take a second here and look at that. The first one touchdown at 3:20. This one touchdown at 3:25.
That's crazy.
So like, that means these two F5 tornadoes touched down at almost the exact same time.
Yeah.
It's terrifying. The tornado first moved across the north edge of Hardinsburg. I'm not saying that right. You can correct me on any of these. Inflicting F3 damage to homes at that location. So the tornado quickly became violent as it moved into Meade County, producing F4 damage as it passed north of Irvington, sweeping away numerous homes in this rural area. Vehicles were thrown hundreds of yards from residences and mangled. A few were completely wrapped around trees, which to me is like an actual like crazy thought of just cars being like thrown everywhere.
Yeah.
One home that was swept away sustained total collapse of poured concrete walkout basement walls.
What?
So it fucked up like the basement, which is actually terrifying because that's where you're supposed to go.
A lot of Kentucky homes are like built into hills. So like I think what they mean by there is like, so like the top part
of the walkout. I got you. Okay.
Right. So like the basement is like in the basement, but it's still like on the side of a hill. So like
that
you
makes
can walk
sense.
out of the basement into the backyard or something.
That makes sense.
That's what I'm picturing.
Okay, no, that makes a lot more sense.
Because a lot of homes here are kind of built that way into the hills.
That makes sense. Okay. A news photographer reported that the tornado left no grass as it crossed the KY-79, which is an interstate, and canceled checks from near Irvington were later found in Ohio. So basically, they found like paper checks from Irvington in Ohio.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Now, past Irvington, the tornado tore directly through Bradenburg in an F5 intensity, completely leveling and sweeping away numerous houses, some of which were well built and anchor bolted. Something I didn't realize is the F4, F5 ratings really go towards like the destruction that occurs. So like they will take into account how well built a house was. Like if it was a crappy built house, it might only get an F4 rating.
Right.
But if it totals like well built houses and like takes away concrete, then it would get the F5. Like I didn't really know that, but the more you know. Town's downtown area was also devastated, with 18 of the fatalities occurring along Green Street alone. Trees and shrubbery in town were debarked and stripped. Intensive wind rowing of debris occurred, and numerous vehicles were destroyed as well, some of which had nothing but the frame and tires left.
Yikes.
A curtain rod was found speared deeply into the trunk of one tree in town.
That's crazy.
Right? So like those videos like up Twister, sometimes I'd be like, that wouldn't really happen. Like what are the odds of like something getting picked up and thrown into something? It happens apparently, which is terrifying. Several tombstones in the Cape Anderson cemetery were toppled and broken, and some were displaced a small distance. You're talking about tombstones, like
cheaper.
So exiting Brandenburg, the tornado crossed into Indiana, producing F4 damage there before dissipating. The town of Brandenburg was nearly destroyed. The same storm would later produce tornadoes in the Louisville metro area. So the Brandenburg tornado is the only tornado to officially produce documented F5 damage in the state of Kentucky, with the 1971 Gosser Ridge, Kentucky tornado being rated an F5 by the National Oceanic, but that it was actually downgraded to an F4 after 2000, which I find interesting. So technically the Brandenburg tornado is the only F5 that has been in Kentucky.
Crazy.
Yeah. So like the chaos is just going to continue. We're going to take a little break from the F5s to talk about some other ones that I thought were super crazy. There were 3 F3 tornadoes that hit at 3:30. They just dropped 3 F3 tornadoes.
Jesus.
one in Lawrence, Indiana, one in Macon, Illinois, and one in McLean, Illinois. During these 3 storms, there were 2 fatalities. Some homes were leveled, but they were not well built enough to warrant the F4 rating, kind of like what we talked about before, which again is kind of crazy. With the one in McLean, Illinois, the tornado destroyed buildings, equipment on 8 separate farms, and 2 homes were destroyed, with a third being removed from its foundation. Multiple vortices caused cycloidal marks in farm fields, and debris were carried up to 10 miles away. I had to look that up because I was like, what is that? This is what those look like. Cycloidal, maybe. I don't know. Isn't that crazy how like it like
yeah. Wow.
There were 3 F4 tornadoes that touched down within minutes of each other. Now we're going to 3 F4s. Fuck.
Oh boy.
In Kennard, Indiana, Bartholomew, Indiana, and Hanover and Madison, Indiana. So they were all in Indiana. Multiple vortex tornado damage destroyed 70% of Kennard, including the school, which had its 2nd story just torn off. Destroyed 48 homes there, and then 11 in nearby Grant City. In Bartholomew, there were 4 deaths. Tornado damage. The tornado destroyed 90% of Hamburg and produced near F5 damage to a farm near New Point. Soon after the DePaul tornado had lifted, the Hanover-Madison F4 formed near Henryville and traveled through Jefferson County, leveling many structures of the small towns near Hanover and Madison. So a total of 11 people were killed in this storm, with an additional 300 injured. According to WHAS TV Louisville reporter, in a special report about the outbreak, 90% of Hanover was destroyed or severely damaged, including Hanover College campus, which was completely fucked up. Despite the fact that no one was killed or seriously injured at the college, 32 of the college's 33 buildings were damaged, including 2 that were completely destroyed and 6 that sustained major structural damage. Hundreds of trees were torn down, completely blocking every campus road. All utilities were knocked out. Communication with this campus was nearly impossible. Damage to the campus alone was estimated at $10 million.
Jesus.
That was an F4 tornado. In Madison alone, 7 of the fatalities took place, and about 300 homes were destroyed. That same storm would strike the Cincinnati area, producing multiple tornadoes, including another F5 tornado.
Cheap.
That same storm would drop another one. It's actually insane to me. It's actually insane. So scary. Okay. Speaking of F5s, the tornado that struck the city of Xenia, Ohio, stands as the deadliest individual tornado of the 1974 super outbreak, killing 32 people and destroying a significant portion of the town. The tornado formed near Bellbrook, Ohio, southwest of Xenia. Also, if I'm saying that right, I'm sorry. It's Xenia. I think it's Xenia.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. At about 4:30 p.m. Eastern time. And you realize it's only been an hour since we started.
That's crazy.
And all this has happened. It began as a moderate-sized tornado that intensified while moving northeast at about 50 miles per hour. The tornado exhibited multiple vortex structures and became very large just as it approached the town. The massive tornado slammed into western parts of Xenia, completely flattening the Windsor Park and Arrowhead subdivisions at an F5 intensity, and sweeping entire rows of brick homes with little debris left in certain areas.
That's crazy.
Extensive wind rowing of debris occurred in nearby fields when the storm reached central Xenia at 4:40. Apartment buildings, homes, businesses, churches, and schools, including Xenia's high school, were completely destroyed. This is one of the crazy stories about this tornado specifically. So students in the school were practicing for a play in the auditorium. They took cover in the main hallway seconds before the tornado dropped a school bus onto the stage where they had been practicing and extensively damaged the school building.
What the heck?
Several railroad cars were lifted and blown over as tornado passed over the moving Penn Central freight train in the center of town. It toppled over headstones in Cherry Grove Cemetery, then moved through the length of downtown business district, passing west of the courthouse, which sustained some exterior damage. Numerous businesses in downtown Xenia were heavily damaged or destroyed, and several people were killed at the A&W root beer stand when the building was flattened.
What? You were just trying to get some burgers and fries.
And some root beer floats. Upon exiting Xenia, the tornado passed through Wilberforce, heavily damaging several campuses and residential buildings of the Wilberforce University. Central State University also sustained considerable damage, and a water tower was toppled over.
Wow.
Afterwards, the tornado weakened before dissipating in Clark County near South Vienna, traveling a little over 30 miles. A total of 32 people lost their lives in this tornado, and about 1,150 were injured in Xenia, several of whom had actually taken proper shelter. In addition to the direct fatalities, 2 Ohio National Guardsmen deployed for disaster assistance were killed on April 17th when a fire swept through their temporary barracks in a furniture store. So
that sucks.
They went to go save people and then they passed away.
Yeah.
The memorial in downtown Xenia lists 34 deaths in honor of the 2 guardsmen. So they were included in the memorial.
That's nice.
Seriously, though. Damage was estimated to be $100 million in that time, which is actually $471 million in today's monies.
Yikes.
Dr. Ted Fujita and a team of colleagues undertook a 10-month study of this outbreak. Fujita initially assigned the Xenia tornado a preliminary rating of an F6 intensity, before deeming F6 ratings were inconceivable. So like literally he tried to even give it a stronger than F5.
Wow.
But they were like, wait, we can't do that. This is as it's starting to form.
This is the F5?
Yeah, so this is as it's starting to form. You can see the multiple vortices.
Oh. What?
So a 15-year-old recorded this on his 8mm camera, and he went outside and recorded. I'm not letting my 15-year-old run out here and fucking record this shit. No way. But you could see how fucking wild it is. Absolutely bonkers.
Wow.
So just to tie up the Xenia, they actually stated that it could be seen from satellite. The damage, the path that the Xenia did was actually viewable from satellite.
Wow.
You
could
could see it.
Yeah.
Which is actually wild. Alrighty, moving right along. So literally at the same time as Xenia was just destroying everything, the Sailor Park tornado started in southeastern Indiana in Ohio County, north of the Rising Sun River near the Ohio River. So it then traveled through Boone County, Kentucky, producing F4 damage in Taylorsport area before crossing the Ohio River a second time back into Ohio. Here, the tornado reached F5 intensity as it slammed into Sailor Park. The first area of town hit was Moorhead Marina, where numerous boats were thrown and destroyed. A large floating restaurant barge at this location was lifted, ripped from its moorings, and flipped by the tornado. It was later recovered several miles downstream, the barge. So yeah. A nearby house was lifted from its foundation and thrown into the river. At a further inland area of Sailor Park, the tornado maintained F5 intensity as numerous homes were swept away at a hilly area near a lake, with only bare slabs remaining. National Weather Service surveyors noted that a pickup truck in this area was carried half a block over the roofs of 5 homes before being smashed to the ground. The tornado weakened somewhat as it continued northwestward, passing through multiple Cincinnati neighborhoods and destroying numerous homes. Some of the worst affected areas were Bridgetown, Mac, Dent, and Delhi. The tornado took 3 lives and injured 210, with 190 of the injuries in Hamilton County, Ohio alone. It was considered the most photographed tornado of the outbreak. This tornado dissipated west of White Oak, but the same thunderstorm activity was responsible for 2 other tornado touchdowns in Lebanon and Mason areas. The Mason tornado, which started in northern Cincinnati subdivision of Arlington Heights and Elmwood Place, was rated an F4, took 2 lives, while the Warren tornado was rated an F2 and injured 10. So it's like wild to me that it drops a crazy heavy storm and then it's like, oh, I'm not done.
Yeah.
About half an hour after the Brandenburg tornado, the same supercell spawned an F4 tornado that formed in the southwest part of Jefferson County. Businesses just northwest of Elizabethtown were leveled, killing 2 people in that area. Damage also noted near Cox Creek, where a 3rd person was killed. 52 homes and 100 barns were destroyed in Nelson County alone, and then the tornado lifted near Bullitt County.
Crazy.
As a cluster of thunderstorms, this is wild. This is a wild one for me. As a cluster of thunderstorms was crossing much of the Ohio Valley and northern Indiana, additional strong storms developed much further south, just east of the Mississippi River into the Tennessee Valley and Mississippi. It produced the first deadly tornado in Alabama during the early evening hours. As we know from our 2011 outbreak, Alabama just gets screwed always.
Yeah.
Most of the small town of Tanner, west of Huntsville in Limestone County, was destroyed when 2 F5 tornadoes struck the community 30 minutes apart. So the first tornado formed at 6:30 Central Time in Lawrence County, Alabama, and ended just over 90 minutes later in Madison County, Alabama, killed 28 people.
Holy crap.
It first touched down near a small community of Mount Hope, then tracked into Mount Moriah, where the tornado rapidly intensified and swept away homes, hurling vehicles, and where a family of 6 was killed. A water pump was completely lifted out of a well house along SR 157, that's crazy. In one case, the destruction was so complete, a witness reported the largest recognizable objects that they could locate in houses were bed springs.
What?
Everything else was just completely obliterated. The tornado, like, can you imagine? No. The tornado crossed into Morgan County, causing additional destruction in rural areas near Hillsborough and Trinity. Crossing the Tennessee River into Limestone County as a large waterspout, the tornado flattened 3/4 a mile width of trees on the opposite bank. So just like ground scoring also occurred in this area as reddish soil was dug up and plastered against trees. The storm then slammed into Tanner, where many homes were swept away, vehicles were tossed, shrubbery was debarked, and Lawson's trailer park sustained major damage.
Wow.
The tornado then continued to Madison County, struck Capshaw and Harvest areas. Numerous homes in Harvest and surrounding rural areas of the county were swept completely away and scattered, and extensive wind, rowing, and debris was noted. One of the most notable pictures is a bathtub from one of the residents was found deeply embedded into the ground.
Yikes.
So not only did it rip a bathtub out, but it then threw it, which is wild.
It's not like a clawfoot bathtub either. That was in the wall bathtub. Wow.
Past Harvest, the tornado abruptly dissipated northeast of town, having a peak width of 500 yards. This is where it sucks. While rescue efforts were underway to look for people under destroyed structures, few were aware that another violent tornado would strike the area less than 30 minutes later. I know, Lily. I know. It's horrible.
We're moving soon. It's okay.
We're giving her nightmares. This is horrible. The path of the second tornado, which was formed at 7:35 p.m. Central Time, was 83 miles in length, also had a peak width of 500 yards. The storm formed along the north bank of the Tennessee River, less than a mile from the path of the earlier storm. Much of its path very closely paralleled its predecessor as it tore through Limestone and Madison counties. So it literally like side by side until Tanner. So 16 people were killed by the second tornado. Tanner was the first community to be hit, and many structures that were left standing after the first tornado were destroyed by the second.
Wait, so what was the strength of the second one? I missed.
F5.
It was another F5?
2 F5s within 30 minutes of each other would hit Tanner.
Oh.
A man injured at Lawson's trailer park in the first tornado was taken to a church in the area, which collapsed in the second tornado. And this happened a lot. After devastating what was left of Tanner, the tornado continued across rural Limestone County into Madison County, where the communities of Capshaw and Harvest were devastated once again. Numerous homes through Madison County were swept completely away, with extensive wind, rowing, and debris noted once again. Past Harvest, the tornado swept away multiple additional homes in Hazel Green area. The tornado continued northwest through rural portions of Madison County before crossing into Tennessee, where major damage and 6 more deaths occurred in Franklin and Lincoln counties before the tornado dissipated in Coffee County. The 2 fatalities in Tennessee occurred when a church was destroyed during service. So the death toll from the 2 tornadoes was over 45 and over 400 were injured. Most of the fatalities occurred in and around Tanner area. Over 1,000 houses, 200 mobile homes, and numerous other outbuildings, automobiles, power lines, trees were completely demolished or heavily damaged. The most recent official National Weather Service records show that both of the Tanner tornadoes were rated at an F5. This is the second state to have been hit by more than 2 F5 tornadoes during the 1974 super outbreak. That's why this one is just
Of course, it's Alabama.
Fucking insane. Oh, speaking of, we're not leaving Alabama yet. The fast-moving nighttime tornado that devastated the town of Gwynn was the longest duration F5 tornado recorded in the outbreak and considered to be one of the most violent ever recorded. So we ain't done yet.
Jesus.
The Gwynn tornado traveled over 79.5 miles from the town of Vernon, Alabama, just south of the small town of Basham before lifting at 10:30 p.m. It formed around 8:50 p.m., and this is Central Time, near Mississippi-Alabama border north of the town of Vernon, striking a Monterey trailer park, resulting in major damage. The tornado then became extremely violent as it approached and entered Gwynn. Multiple areas of the F5 damage noted in and around town. The tornado first struck the Gwynn mobile home plant as it entered town, completely obliterating the structure. Nothing was left of the plants but a pile of mangled steel beams, and its foundation was partially pushed clean of debris.
You're joking, right? This is a joke.
No.
That is not a plant. That's not where they manufacture things. That is...
You can see the steel beams. The town's downtown area was also heavily damaged, with many brick houses and 2 churches completely destroyed. Trees in town were debarked, ground scoring occurred, vehicles were thrown and mangled as well. Residential areas in Gwynn were just completely destroyed, with many homes swept completely away, scattered across fields. According to National Weather Service damage surveyor Bill Herman, the damage in a 6-block area was particularly extreme, and remarked that, this is a quote, "It was just like the ground had been swept clean. It was just as much of a total wipeout as you can have." Surveyor J.B. Elliott noted that the destruction was so complete that even some of the foundations were dislodged and in some cases swept away. A total of 23 people were killed in Gwynn. The tornado continued past Gwynn to strike a small community of Twin, destroying numerous homes, mobile homes, and businesses in that location, though the damage was less intense than observed in Gwynn. Crossing into Winston County, the tornado struck a small community of Delmar, destroying additional homes, killing additional 5 people. Mobile homes in Delmar were obliterated with their frames wrapped around trees. Past Delmar, the tornado grew up to a mile wide as it tore through William B. Bankhead National Forest, flattening huge swath of trees. Surveyors noted that the timber damage was equally severe at all elevations in this area, with numerous trees snapped along and exposed ridges and deep gorges, meaning like the intensity of the tornado was just strong the entire way.
Wow.
The tornado finally dissipated south of Basham after destroying 546 structures. That same supercell would then re-strengthen and produce a new tornado just south of the town of Decanter.
Wow.
You can see the tornado track through the National Forest in Gwynn.
Interesting.
Obviously, there are so many other tornadoes that occurred, but I didn't want to, spend the entire day doing this. And I know you guys got stuff to do, so I kind of just really wanted to hit the main ones. In the aftermath of this horrific event, many lessons were learned that have since been applied by various government agencies to mitigate hazards and subsequent severe weather outbreaks. So much like Nikki's story, we learned a lot. Thank goodness.
Right.
Improvements in communications, warning systems, emergency preparedness, and forecast techniques and equipment have been implemented since the super outbreak, with the end result being increased lead times for warnings, more accurate forecasts of events, greater public awareness, and more reliable communications. I'm just going to end with the map of the actual outbreak. Shows the F5 ones. I tried so hard. Remember when we did the 2011 one? There was that really cool map which showed all of them. I could not find one for this. I looked everywhere. Yeah,
there's this one that's in the Wikipedia.
Yeah. So
doesn't have it in chronological order. They're just all there.
They're just all there.
You can see the pattern.
But yeah, that's a very condensed story of the 1974 super outbreak. So
because if you look at the map that we'll have on our socials and in our YouTube video, it's a lot of.
It was a lot. I skipped a lot
of lines.
I tried. So like I said, I really tried to focus on the F5s just because there were 7, and I think that's the most.
That's so crazy.
That's the most F5s in an outbreak to date, but there were what did I say, 27 F4s, and F4s will fuck shit up. That's not nothing. That even like that, because I sent you the Wikipedia thing, like if you scroll, even like the F2s and F1s, they're all landing at the same fucking time. Like it actually just, it was overwhelming looking at that. I was like, that's just crazy. There's at 2200, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 F2s, 1 F1, and an F3. Literally all within 5 minutes of each other.
That was so crazy.
So just wild. Anyway.
Terrifying.
Just actually terrifying. I am gonna add the United Kingdom outbreak because I thought tornadoes were just a US thing, so I definitely want to do that. I probably won't do it next time, guys. I'm probably gonna take a break from tornadoes. I'm not gonna lie, because it's been a lot, and I also want to do a tsunami, which I don't know why. What's wrong with me? I have like this fascination with them. I don't understand why, but we'll definitely hit that up next time at some point. So yeah, that's it for this episode.
Crazy.
Wild. If you enjoy the podcast, don't forget to follow us. Leave a comment if you're watching on YouTube. Hi, like and subscribe. We got a comment that says it's absolute shite, and I'm so confused because I want to know if that's feedback we could take into consideration, or if what was happening in the episode was, because it kind of was just absolute crap what was happening like during our episode. So like I'm just curious. So if you do leave a comment, give us some context so we understand. If you're just giving us feedback, or yeah. But yeah, make sure to like and subscribe.
And you can find us also on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok with our username at TTATA Podcast. Eventually, I will have time to start posting more TikToks.
Shit. What are TikToks? No. We'll get there. There's some on there. You guys should go check them out.
But in our bio of all of our social media is our email. So if you want to clarify on what was shite, you can send us an email. Let us know. Or if you have any topic ideas, hit us up.
Do it. So thanks for listening. Next week we are doing some true crime. How are we already back on true crime? You know why? Because it's a middle topic. It's one that we like always hit, because I was like, I feel like we just did true crime. But yeah, so we're doing true crime. I'm excited about. And then the following one is cults.
Oh boy.
Ooh, I got some crazy ones for you. And with that, we're gonna leave you with this inspirational quote. It might be ASMR because Nikki can't talk too loud.
Only when we're drowning do we understand how fierce our feet can kick.
Ooh.
By Amanda Gorman.
Oh man. Wow. Only when you're threatened do you realize how strong you are. Interesting. I know there's a lot of things where you're like, oh, I could never do that. I could never do that. In regards to so many things, but then when you're forced to do it, you realize you can.
Yeah.
I think honestly that was one of the things that I learned last year, the hell year, was I was always like, I could never handle that. I'm not strong enough mentally. And things just kept happening. And I was like, oh, if one more thing happens, I'm just going to fucking lose it. I'm going to break, and I'm not going to be able to, I'm going to fall apart. Granted, I did, but, but I came back. And so now knowing looking, and actually one of my bosses at work said this to me, and I was like, that's so smart. She was like, look at what you've been through. Look how strong you are. You could fucking take on anything. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's so true. Instead of worrying about what the next thing's gonna happen, no, look at what you've already dealt with. You're a badass. So remind yourself. It's so scary when you're faced with all that shit, but you're a badass. You can handle it. And if you can't, get help. Reach out for help. There's people.
Facts.
So thanks for listening again, guys.
Until next time.
Bye. Bye.